Hey, peace, everyone. This is Ilmatical, broadcasting from Saigon, a place you know as Ho Chi Minh City. So today's topic of this video is should I come to Vietnam? I got an email from an associate of mine I met in Siem Reap a year ago, and he's in Taiwan right now. And he's like, hey, Clark, should I even bother coming to Vietnam? Is it worth it? So let me explain whether or not who should come to Vietnam, and just from my perspective, and whether it'll work for you. Of course, if you're a tourist, yes, it makes sense to come to Vietnam. There's plenty of things here for tourists to do. I wouldn't travel to Vietnam from America unless like I had a relative here. I just wanted to visit. It's not the kind of place that I would travel to the other side of the earth for, just to come. Like I would go to China instead, and Hong Kong, and Singapore, and things like that. However, if you're already in Asia, it's worth checking Vietnam out. Passing through Ho Chi Minh and then traveling north to the other cities. It's a very beautiful country so far. What I've seen. Ho Chi Minh is a large, very large city. It's describing it. It's not only just large. It's dense. It's very saturated. There's so many people. There's so many motorbikes. Um, but the people here, the weather is relatively warm all year round, and the people here they have a good vibe. They're really chill. I also mentioned this because there was a young woman on a Facebook thread. She posted in a group. She asked. She's a Caucasian, a European woman. She said, "My friends are visiting from the United States, and they're black. What can they expect?" And basically, I think as a tourist, if you're a tourist in Vietnam, if you're here for like a month, 2 months, as long as you're living in a tourist experience, you're not going to see too much racism. You're going to see racism here when you start entering certain subcultures. It's going to take a while. Now, let me just say this: that's not doesn't mean that it's going to be like horrific racism. Don't go around looking for it. Again, the racism that you get in Southeast Asia versus Chinese racism. Chinese racism is basically like very direct. It's very blatant. It's usually just based on some ignorance. Not saying they're stupid. It's like Chinese people may say, okay, well, these black people are bad, and then when they get to know you, they really like you. Versus Vietnamese people, they won't say anything to you. They'll just smile at you and not trust you. Now, having that been said, it doesn't mean that they're all like that. Again, what I'm coming to learn, what I have been learning progressively as I travel, is that you have to understand a culture first. Put culture first because there's things that Vietnamese people do to each other that if you see it, you just won't understand it. So when it happens to you, the first thing you're gonna say is, "Oh, it's racism." But actually, what happens is like there's a lot of I don't want to say infighting. Um, it's a culture that takes a while to understand. I don't think I've only been here about 7 months, and I'm still trying to understand Vietnamese mentality because it's multifaceted, it's multi-layered. You have people that are ethnic Chinese, you have traditional Vietnamese culture. So again, if you're traveling and you're just on vacation, it makes sense to come here. Now, if you are moving here, there are plenty of business opportunities in Ho Chi Minh City. This is like the one city I say right now. It's not very saturated and it's developing at an accelerating rate. If you follow a lot of app technologies, you know that one of the most popular apps, it didn't get started here, but Grab, it's called Grab Taxi. I'm actually writing an article about it now. It took off in Vietnam, but Grab Taxi took off here. So if you are an entrepreneur and you want to look at some uh, apps, you build apps, Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City is a really good place to start out. Now, one of the things that prevented me from even considering Vietnam while I was in other parts of Asia, like I would just Google information and try to find out information about getting a visa, and it just like the worst place to try to move to. Vietnam is like the chillest and easiest place to get into. Let me explain, especially if you have an American passport. All right, but I see plenty of brothers from the continent here. Again, so if you are, it really depends on your situation. I've seen Europeans here. I've seen everybody. I've seen a lot of brothers here too from the continent, and then they're doing pretty well in Vietnam. And that's another thing. You hear a lot about racism and stuff, but as I'm in the country, I found out like several years ago, several decades ago during the Vietnam War, I think the French had a garrison of African troops, and they left them in Vietnam for a while, over 10 years. And these men had wives, and they were part of the Vietnamese village, and they were members of the community, and the people liked them. So when you hear a lot about don't go to certain cities, and this is in Hanoi actually. When you hear about, and I've always heard the racism is very bad in Hanoi. Again, you have to understand, don't let gatekeepers keep you from certain locations. Now, I'm not, you have to go to these places, even if you are a black traveler. Um, you have to go to these places and experience these things for yourself, all right? And make your own observation. Because what happens, again, I think, especially here, because this culture in Vietnam is very bewildering. It is for me. You're going to experience uh, things within the culture that are very odd, and it will be confusing. And what happens is you're going to interpret that as racism. So remember, understand the culture first. So again, now, if you are an English teacher, there's plenty of opportunities here. It's easy to get a visa. All you have to do, even if you're a tourist, right? If you want a visa, there's a company called Sun Viet Travel. Sun Viet Travel, and they're in Ho Chi Minh City. There's a guy named Johnny. He has a Facebook page. He updates it daily. Call him. You can email. The website is Sun Viet Travel. I'll put the link in the bottom of this page. And you get the visa, you get the letter, and then it's easy. That's one of the things that prevented me from coming to Vietnam. I thought it was like ridiculously difficult to get a travel visa or work visa or business visa, and I was like, man, I'm not messing with that place. It's easy. Just get the letter, and then that's it. It's not as easy as Cambodia, where they just give you a stamp, but you just got to get the letter, and it's a process, and it's a pain in the butt a little bit, but it's not. After that, you're in, and then once you come here, you get your work visa and everything, and Vietnamese people will help you do everything else you need to do. All right, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So, it is a communist country. Ho Chi Minh doesn't really feel communist compared to China. I'm going to another location soon, so I'll see how things are there. So yeah, I think like if you're an English teacher and so forth, you can definitely come here. Uh, again, they seem to be somewhat serious about improving the standard of education in the country. So if you're a serious teacher, there's other places I would go in Asia. Um, if you're a serious teacher, I mean, the educational system there is not bad. There's some good schools here. There's a place called ILA. That's a relatively good school. British Council is here. So these are good locations if you're serious about, and then you can take that experience and go elsewhere. Uh, I just think that, but it's not as the culture now compared to Phnom Penh. I think that Ho Chi Minh City is bigger. Phnom Penh is way too small and very underdeveloped. So now I wouldn't recommend this city for a first-time traveler, regardless of your race or complexion or anything. I would not. So I think the culture is a little bit more is very overwhelming. I think like first-time travelers, first time leaving your country, you should probably try something a little more stable, like a larger city, like I don't know, Shanghai, Hong Kong. Uh, but I think it's a good time to get into Ho Chi Minh because it's developing at an accelerating rate, right? So this is the time that you want to try to get here, right? But like I said, there's other places in Asia that you can really go to that are a little bit more cost effective. Like the one thing that Cambodia has over Ho Chi Minh is it's not as expensive. Um, Cambodia is dirt cheap, but the culture it doesn't have it's not as developed. The culture here is pretty decent. There's an appreciation for arts, education. So there are many different things for you to do as a foreigner. The expat community here is not that sophisticated. You have a lot of drunk losers, fake English teachers. That's another video. I'm not going to get into that, but You have a lot of like backpackers and stuff like that. But once you get away from them, there's a very small, sophisticated expat community, and they're not as sophisticated as those like you would find in Shanghai or Hong Kong or Singapore. So, having that been said, yeah, give it a shot. Vietnamese people, Vietnam is cool. All right. So on that note, I will leave you with this information. If you have any more questions, hit me up, and I'll be back with another video soon from another part of Vietnam. Peace out.